When the House Oversight Committee finally released over 20,000 pages of Epstein-related records, it was like Washington suddenly stopped in its tracks. After years of rumors, partisan battles, and hidden court documents, the public is at last getting a glimpse into what many had long suspected: the truth about who Jeffrey Epstein was emailing, speaking with, and trying to influence behind the scenes.
Tonight in newly released emails, ex-offender Jeffrey Epstein repeatedly discussing Donald Trump, shedding new light on their long friendship and seeming to suggest Trump had information he never shared. In a 2011 exchange with his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein writing the quote, "dog that hasn't barked."
You two Democrats insisted that Americans have the right to know everything about the people in power, especially the president. No more secrecy, no hand-picked leaks, and no special treatment for the elite. But the second those documents were made public, it all turned into political warfare. Democrats had already released 3 Epstein emails mentioning contact with Donald Trump. Republicans hit back immediately, dumping thousands of additional pages and accusing Democrats of cherry-picking information to falsely implicate President Donald Trump. Trump denied every claim, dismissing it all as political theater, and even went as far as to call Marjorie Taylor Greene a traitor for supporting the release of the documents at a time when people were speculating he may have been involved in Epstein's worst crimes.
Escalating war of words within the GOP over the Epstein files, President Trump sparring with one of his most loyal allies, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, calling her a traitor in a social media post. Greene firing back as a critical vote on the Epstein files is set for Tuesday. ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang reports from Washington.
Tonight, just days before the House is set to vote on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, President Trump ramping up attacks on one of his closest allies. Trump declaring he's withdrawing his supported endorsement of Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of 4 Republicans who joined Democrats to force that vote. Trump accusing Greene of betraying the entire Republican Party, calling her a ranting lunatic and a traitor. Greene firing back, questioning why the president is fighting so hard to stop the files from being released.
The president even suggested he'd be open to backing a challenger to her seat in Congress.
And I'm no longer much of a vet.
Greene punching back today in a series of social media posts saying, quote, "I never thought that fighting to release the Epstein files, defending women who were victims of rape, and fighting to expose the web of rich, powerful elites would have caused this. But here we are." The firebrand conservative has been a steadfast supporter of the president, often appearing by his side at campaign events.
We're going to re-elect our favorite president, the greatest president in United States history, Donald J. Trump.
He is charming. He is able to convince people. So he tells everybody what they want to hear.
So how do you know this?
That's his strength.
He has a sense of humor. He can be funny.
Right. His ability to sell. It's very much like Clinton. Both Bill and Donald have the ability to go over to a fat, ugly woman. So you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
You probably never get a scalp reduction. You just get the same male pattern that the real have.
He's not even horrible human being who has nasty things to his best friends' wives. Anyone who first tries to gain your trust and then uses it in bad ways.
But the real story unfolding in those pages was bigger than any single political party. The emails showed that Epstein didn't take sides. He reached out to everyone: Republicans, Democrats, renowned scholars, media insiders, celebrities, and billionaires. He circulated among all of them. One of the most notable figures in the files was Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary and president of Harvard. Records show he communicated with Epstein for more than 7 years.
Actual email composed and sent by Larry Summers, former president of Harvard University, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, and former director of the National Economic Council. Not only did he have multiple email exchanges with Jeffrey Epstein, at least one of which was essentially asking him for dating advice, but imagine Even receiving an email like this, it's hard to make heads or tails out of what's being said here. SoftBank deputy guy I liked and seemed aware and honest regarding son. Lots of slathering to Saudis. I yipped about inclusion. I observed that half the IQ in world was possessed by women without mentioning they are more than 51% of population. I guess he wants a pat on the back for that. Mnuchin plumbs new depths. War seems more likely than I used to think. DJT is world's luckiest guy in terms of opposition, economy, etc. Still think his world will collapse. I'm trying to figure why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and you can't work at a network or a think tank. Do not repeat this insight sent from my iPad. This is almost as bad as reading a transcript of one of Trump's speeches, except for Larry Summers was, I guess, tapping this out on his iPad. I want to talk very briefly about two things in this email. The first is the comment about women's intellectual capacity. Some of you may recall that in 2005, when he was president of Harvard, he made comments at a conference that was about women and minorities in science, in which he basically said that women have less innate capacity for science, and that is why there are less women than men in science. These remarks were met with quite a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, and ultimately led to his resignation from that post. In 2005, I was a medical student at a place called Stanford University. I had graduated from college with a degree in biomedical engineering with a 3.97 GPA. I remember him making those comments and being absolutely livid that he suggested that someone like me could not succeed in science when I was doing that exact thing. Not only that, but there were many women at his own institution excelling in science. And here he was in 2017 still getting digs in at the expense of women. The other point I want to raise here is when he talks about this section, which is essentially him whining about cancel culture. I want to point out that this man went on to be the director of the National Economic Council after he left Harvard. He continues to be extremely prominent. He holds an endowed chair at Harvard University, and he is whining to a file about cancel culture. As if that weren't bad enough, here he is in 2019 asking Jeffrey Epstein for advice on this situation. Pause to read. And yeah, he was married at that time, at least according to Wikipedia. Still is.
Summers also made remarks about women and told Epstein not to repeat them, saying, "Do not repeat this insight." Another name in the emails was author Michael Wolff, whom Epstein contacted for advice on stories involving Bill Clinton, Stephen Hawking, and others. In one message, Epstein wrote, "Clinton was never ever there. Never." When Epstein learned Reuters was preparing a report involving Trump, Wolff responded, "Let me know if there's anything I can do." Epstein reportedly believed he had enough damaging information to destroy Trump, and he was preparing to use it.
Unearthing new and incredibly revealing details about Jeffrey Epstein and his opinions of Donald Trump, someone that Epstein once called his closest friend for 10 years. The emails and text messages show that Epstein continued to be focused on Trump when he became president, questioning his sanity, psychoanalyzing him as someone who feels alone and might, quote, crack, even suggesting without explanation in one email, quote, "I am the one able to take him down." Obviously, in the context of all of this, you want to know more there, but we don't have the context. The two men, of course, were once extremely close. Several associates of both of them have told us over the past year that they were the best of friends.
Epstein kept bringing up Donald Trump long after Trump said their friendship ended. His private comments about Trump were, for the most part, remarkably negative and harsh, and he sort of often cast himself as someone who understood the former president's mindset. Now, in messages in 2017 and 2018, he described him as, quote, "effing crazy." You can see it right there, speculated he might have early dementia, called him a maniac, borderline insane. There was something where he compared him to a mob boss. There was something where somebody messaged him and said, "Trump is truly stupid," to which he replied, "Duh." So, you know, one of the emails that we found that was very interesting was this one to Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, in which Epstein harshly described Trump, writing, quote, I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body. So yes.
There were also messages linked to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince. Epstein forwarded him an article from the Daily Mail about allegations, and Andrew responded by saying he didn't know anything about it and asked how Epstein was addressing it. Epstein tried to calm him down, even making a disturbing joke. The only person she didn't have sex with was Elvis. Epstein also contacted billionaire Peter Thiel, CEO of Palantir, with a message saying, "Deck visit me Caribbean." Thiel replied politely but firmly denied ever going.
Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, who's currently on a tour talking about the Antichrist everywhere, and Steve Bannon were all listed in this.
You know what the craziest it is? I saw this clip from Joe Rogan recently. I forget exactly what I was watching. I was watching someone on YouTube. Talk about Peter Thiel, and they unearthed a clip from fairly recent, maybe, where Peter Thiel went on Joe Rogan. Thiel was like, "Yeah, I knew Jeffrey Epstein. Like, I have connections to him." And Joe Rogan was like, "Oh yeah, before he was arrested, right?" And Peter Thiel was like, "No, I hung out with him after he was arrested and was like a known."
I met Epstein a few times as well, and I think.
How'd you get introduced?
It was Reid Hoffman in Silicon Valley introduced us in 2014, but it was basically I didn't ask enough questions about it. I think there were sort of a lot of things where it was fraudulent. I do think Epstein knew a lot about taxes.
And you were introduced to him. How was he described to you?
He was described as one of the smartest tax people in the world.
Interesting.
And I probably was my moral weakness that I.
Well, how could you have known back then? He had never been arrested.
No, this was 2014. It was post arrest.
Oh, so his arrest was the first arrest, right?
Yeah,
which was like
2007, 08.
And it's like, what do you mean? Why would you admit that you actively still hung out with him after he was a convicted? This is.
Thiel has long been rumored to be a powerful asset for the Israeli lobby in the U.S. And considering Epstein has also been strongly suspected of having ties to Mossad, many believe the two kept close ties even after Epstein's conviction. Whitney Webb, a highly respected investigative journalist known for her deep reporting on America's elite and its military-industrial networks, has also spoken about how Peter Thiel helped elevate J.D. Vance to national prominence.
The name that's most important as it relates to Vance is going to be Peter Thiel. As people have noted, Vance worked at Mithril Capital, where Mithril, by the way, a big investor in the stablecoin issuer Paxos, which plays a pretty big role in the piece we'll be discussing later. And from Mithril, he went on to be involved with some of these other VC funds, one tied to an AOL co-founder, one of them receiving a lot of money, this Rise of the Rest fund. It was heavily funded by people like Jeff Bezos and the Walton family from Walmart, who, if you're familiar with the Waltons, are in, very tied up historically with the Clintons, specifically Hillary. And then, from there, he's his political career, a lot of Thiel involvement. Once again, a lot of donations from Thiel and other members of the so-called PayPal mafia, like David Sachs and Elon Musk, of course. Being a big, part of the fundraising apparatus, as are some other companies that Thiel helped create, like Palantir, which is now part of the super PAC with the Winklevoss twins and Elon Musk. And then you also have Joe Lonsdale, who's a Palantir co-founder with Peter Thiel.
Whitney then explained why this should concern everyday Americans, pointing to how Thiel and Palantir are working on surveillance technologies that could allow the military to monitor its own citizens.
Is this bad? I could probably go on a rant for a very long time about Peter Thiel, so I'm just going to try and condense it. I've been reporting on him and specifically on Palantir for a very long time. If I would encourage people to look at those reports, because it's very clear that Palantir was expressly created by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp to be the privatization of this program they tried to launch after 9/11 at DARPA that was called Total Information Awareness. Pretty sure, Marty, we've discussed it before, and total information awareness was basically to create a giant data mining operation that would be combined with artificial intelligence for the purpose of basically creating a pre-crime society, not just predictive policing, but also predicting pandemics before they happen. And bioterror attacks and terror attacks before they happen. And since then, it's been, privatized as Palantir. Palantir's done all of those things. During COVID, they were trying to predict COVID outbreaks before they happen by surveilling wastewater in conjunction with HHS. They've done predictive policing programs all throughout the United States. They're a contractor with pretty much every intelligence agency. Their only client until 2008 was the CIA. Palantir engineers in the early years of the company made over 200 visits to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Alex Karpus said on record the CIA was always the...
So it becomes clear, people with enormous power who were once linked to Epstein may now be shaping the future of America from behind closed doors, with Peter Thiel emerging as one of the most influential. Figures from politics, media, and business didn't just know Epstein. They treated him as someone within their circle, asking for advice, reacting to scandals, trading information, even sharing jokes. The documents didn't reveal a single villain. They revealed just how deeply Epstein was connected across powerful networks.
Social media that he had directed Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, quote, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, J.P. Morgan Chase, unquote, because he went on to say, all, quote, arrows are pointing to the Democrats, unquote. Wait, what arrows? What investigation? The July 7th memo made clear, as I just read, there were no arrows, and all investigations had led to the same conclusion. Let me repeat it, quote, we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties, unquote. Today, Bondi said she'd already assigned the investigation to prosecutors in New York. Does that mean they missed something before? They didn't do their jobs? That the DOJ blundered on one of the highest profile investigations of this year? Is this an investigation or a diversion? Sifting the government's own statements and actions makes it very hard to tell. What we do know is Epstein's victims are where they have always been, persistently seeking all the government knows and has yet to reveal or act upon. Many sent an open letter to Congress today about future consideration of a bill to demand release of all the Epstein files, which doubtless will include information about convicted accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. That letter to members of Congress reads in part, there is no middle ground here. There is no hiding behind party affiliation. Epstein and Maxwell's crimes exposed a double standard of justice where rich and powerful men and women evade.
And when the public began demanding answers about his sudden death, the explanations from officials only raised more suspicion. At first, they claimed he was being monitored closely. Then, without warning, they admitted he wasn't. Later, they said the cameras malfunctioned, yet never explained how every camera near his cell happened to fail at the same time. Then it was the guards. They said they had fallen asleep. But the truth is, hardly anyone believes the official narrative, not even Epstein's own family.
Speaking to Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, he believes his brother did not take his own life in the Metropolitan Correction Center in New York, that in fact, he was killed.
Well, the first time he told me he was getting in trouble, that was back in 2006. He asked me to come talk to him. We were both in New York at the time, and he told me he was getting into trouble because he was with girls that were too young. He said he was stupid. He realized he was stupid, and he wanted me to hear it from him as opposed to, on the news or something.
What was your reaction when he told you?
Well, yeah, I was surprised. I didn't really say much because what's to say? I mean, he told me what was going on, and I just accepted that. And I knew whatever he did. I believe in, even though he's my brother, I always believe in consequences and ramifications for your actions. So if he was going to get in trouble, he was going to have to deal with it.
And so, what do you think happened to him then? He was arrested. He was in prison, and then he died. What do you think happened to him?
Well, when I first heard that he was dead, the government report, it said that they notified me. They didn't notify me. I heard it on CNN, and it said Jeffrey Epstein was found dead from an apparent suicide, in his cell. And I figured, well, I had no reason to doubt it. I thought he decided to take himself out. I wasn't keeping track of, his case on a daily basis, but I knew that he was facing a potentially long term in jail, and I know he wouldn't want to live that way. So I just assumed, okay, there was no reason to doubt it. He took himself out, and I respected that decision. But then the next day, I had to go back to New York early to identify his body because I'm the next of kin. And then they did an autopsy, which they always do. And they both came out of the autopsy saying they couldn't call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. And that doesn't appear in any of the records, or nobody talks about that the two pathologists, two highly qualified pathologists, said this looks more like a murder.
But there was a major investigation into his death, which concluded that it was suicide. Have you got any evidence?
Wait, I have to interrupt you there. They said there was a thorough investigation, but they've given no proof of that. It was never, as far as I know, it was never investigated as a potential homicide. Because if it was, there's a lot of things they should have done.
Questions surrounding the guards and the other inmates only deepen the uncertainty. Official reports never explained who else was on the tier or why certain identities remained undisclosed. Years later, crucial details are still missing, which has only fueled the belief that something far more complex happened than what authorities claimed.
You seem to be suggesting there was some sort of conspiracy. So who do you think might have been involved in your brother's death?
Well, I don't think that one of the prisoners did it on his own accord, because if that was the case, they would have found out who it was and prosecuted him. So if Jeff was just, willy-nilly by another inmate, there's no reason for any cover-up. There's no reason for any, for this nonsense.
The theory gaining momentum is that his death may have been tied to the dangerous information he held. Information that could have exposed or damaged some of the world's most powerful individuals.
Do you think your brother had information, knew things about powerful people that would have embarrassed them, potentially led them to be in the same position as he was in prison, and that was the reason?
I believe so, yes.
And what about the situation we've seen?
Jeffrey mentioned he had dirt on people. He didn't tell me what he knew, but he said, he led me to believe that he had, dirt on people.
Did he tell you who he knew things about?
Well, in the 2016 election, we were talking about the election, and Jeffrey told me that if he said what he knew about the candidates, they would have to cancel the election. That's a quote. That's exactly what he told me. He said, if I said what I knew about the candidates, they'd have to cancel the election. He didn't tell me what he knew, but that's what he said.
Well, clearly Donald Trump was one of those candidates. Tell us about the relationship as far as you understood it. How close were your brother Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump?
They were very close. They used to fly in each other's planes. Donald Trump was in Jeffrey's office many times, and there's witnesses that could testify that they saw Trump in Jeffrey's office. So I don't know why he said he was never in Jeffrey's office. That's just a blatant lie. I couldn't believe he actually said that, because it's so provable.
The celebrities linked to him only intensified public interest. People point to politicians, CEOs, scientists, actors, big names who visited him, contacted him, or traveled on his plane. There's even a fascinating Joe Rogan podcast with Elon Musk from a few months ago that, in retrospect, seems almost prophetic. It leaves people asking, what might those two have already known?
You should have asked if Epstein killed himself.
Yeah, that's the Cash Patel thing.
Where's the camera?
Where's it? Dan Bongino, when they were trying to convince everybody of that. Like, okay.
The guards weren't there, and the camera stopped working, and
the guards were asleep. The cameras weren't working. He had a giant steroided up bodybuilder guy that he was sharing a cell with that was who was a bad cop. Like, all of it's kind of nuts. Yeah. All of it's kind of nuts. Like, that he would just kill himself rather than reveal all of his billionaire friends.
Yeah.
And then,
did you see Tim Dillon talking to Chris Cuomo about this?
I did. Chris Cuomo just looked so stupid.
Tim just listed off all those.
And he's like, I agree, it is strange. Like, of course it's strange, Chris. Jesus Christ. You can't just go with the tide. You got to think things through. And if you think that one through, you're like, I don't think he himself? Nobody does. You'd have to work for an intelligence agency to think he killed himself.
It does seem unlikely.
It seems highly unlikely. highly unlikely. All roads point to murder.
Yes.
Point to they had to get rid of him because he knew too much. Whatever the fuck he was doing, whatever kind of an asset he was, whatever thing he was up to, it was apparently very effective.
Yes.
And a lot of people were compromised.
From there, the discussions went deeper into who Epstein might have truly been working for. Later, Joe Rogan sat down with Danny Jones to explore who Epstein really was beyond his public crimes.
Just get real and say,
if I gun to your head, what do you think your best assessment of what Epstein, who was Epstein, who was he working for?
Well, I don't know, right? So I'm just guessing. Everybody wants to say he was working for the Mossad. He very well could have been. He could have been working for the CIA. He could have been a guy who was on his own, but also working with them, right? Like a guy that they used, but they never fully endorsed.
Like an asset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a guy who could move money around.
Right.
He definitely...
Good at laundering money.
The moving money around stuff was very weird because he had money through no way that anybody could ever explain.
Yeah.
He had an enormous amount of money through no way that nobody could ever explain. Which, if you're state funded, you're funded by Israel, and Israel's funded by America, and there's also NGOs and nonprofits, and there's ways to move money around where you can give this guy money.
Yeah.
So he was like Weinstein, who is an economist, right? Weinstein's a legitimate mathematician.
Eric?
Yeah. So when Eric met him, his first inclination was he was a fraud.
He's a construct.
Yeah, a construct. And did he tell you the whole story about the girl sitting on his lap?
Yep.
He was obviously nerd fishing. He was fishing for nerds, and I think he caught a lot of nerds in that net. There's a lot of those 100%. Guys that wound up going to that island. They probably thought, this is great. We get to party.
Nothing's free.
And they probably felt like they were rock stars because they get to hang out with the intellectual elite on an island with a guy who's just a billionaire philanthropist who's eccentric, who just loves women. He's a professed bachelor, and it all seemed too good to be true.
It's so true.
Because it was.
Yeah.
So I think he was an asset, whether or not it was for the Mossad strictly, or Israel strictly, or the United States strictly, whether it was a CIA thing, whatever, I don't know. But I think it was probably a part of a blackmail compromise.
And with someone possessing that kind of information, how much can we really trust governments to tell the truth? Do you believe the Epstein files still hold more secrets? Where do you think this leads? Share your thoughts down below. If you want the truth that others are too afraid to talk about, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because here on Taylor Tells All, we dig into everything the powerful never want you to see.